Hi everyone, welcome back. Yes, I'm here recording another PowerPoint voiceover. This week we're talking about data collection techniques and specifically the different types of measures. As you saw from the readings, Macmillan splits measures into three classifications, and you see them on the screen. We're going to talk about those as well as some issues that we see with different forms of measures. One of the basic categories is cognitive versus non-cognitive. Cognitive measures reflect things like aptitude tests, entrance exams, graduation exams. For the research questions most of you identified for your MRP, you proposed efforts that reflect non-cognitive measures, as your interests reflect attitudes or perceptions of phenomena. There are big advantages to commercially developed measures. Reliability and validity have been established and verified through subsequent uses, but that often comes with a hefty price tag. Beyond cost, another issue with commercially prepared measures is that they might not get at exactly what you want to learn from participants. This leads many researchers to develop their own instruments. A crucial step in locally prepared measures is pilot testing. One of the challenges we face with the use of non-cognitive measures is that we largely rely on self-report data. When we utilize self-report data, we're embarking on a journey reliant on trust. For example, on a questionnaire, we might ask students to report their GPAs. There have been studies that have compared self-report GPA with actual GPA, and students generally overestimate their GPAs when asked to self-report. So we almost have to take self-report data with a grain of salt. In terms of types of quantitative measures, Macmillan identifies four types: tests, questionnaires, observations, and interviews. We're going to talk briefly about each of these. As you saw from your readings, hopefully the presentation of tests was fairly straightforward. Tests are largely cognitive in their construction, or seek to measure students on cognitive scales. In terms of score interpretation, there are two forms: norm referenced and criterion referenced. You've probably seen norm referenced before listed as group reference, where an individual's performance is measured against the performance of a peer group. Sometimes this is expressed as against an average. Criterion reference tests are all about a student meeting or not meeting a pre-established metric, such as graduating from the exit exam, or passing the exit exam, or not making the cutoff for being promoted from one grade to the next. A key issue with tests is standardization. If you're curious about some current perspectives on standards-based testing and the role of standardization in tests, take a look at the debate that surrounds Common Core testing in K-12 public schools in various states throughout the United States. Those fall into what Macmillan has listed on this slide as the bottom bullet: standards-based. These are criterion reference tests based on established standards. And you can see high stakes tests is underlined. And that is what that's what the debate of Common Core is all about, are those the role of high stakes tests and just what is that criteria and how has it been established. When I took stats courses both in undergrad and grad school, we spent a lot of time calculating z-scores. I really can't tell you what I learned from those experiences and those exercises. So we're not doing that in this course. Because today, with the use of stat software packages, z-scores are computed in the background, but it's still good to understand what a z-score is all about. And on this slide, you can see that the z-score represents the difference between a raw score and the median and the mean in standard deviation units. The next form of measure that is addressed in this chapter is questionnaire. And sometimes we use the terms survey and questionnaire interchangeably. So as we go through this semester beyond this week, and you hear me say survey or see something about surveys on Canvas, we're talking about questionnaires. Questionnaires are completely non-cognitive, as we use them to try to measure participants' attitudes, values, interests, perspectives, perceptions, and the like. When I work with people on developing questionnaires, I strongly advise the use of an even number option scale. Eliminating a neutral option forces the participant to make a response choice and is more likely to yield data that actually reflects participant attitudes, beliefs, or other non-cognitive dimensions being measured. Here are some examples of some Likert scales. And yes, I know it looks like it should be Likert, but it is actually pronounced Likert. I had a colleague at Louisiana State University who always liked to tell the story that she met Likert at a conference, and he was very adamant about the pronunciation of his last name. And she found out the hard way because she said Likert scale during a presentation, and Dr. Likert was actually in the room. You've probably seen semantic scales before, and sometimes they're expressed as numeric continuums. So maybe it's rate your agreement with a statement on a scale of 1 to 10, where the options, all the integers between 1 and 10 are there as options, or something like that. You've probably seen questionnaires where there are checklist options, where you would rate your preference with an item where there are multiple options allowable. Maybe when you registered for a conference and you were asked to indicate your interest in various session topics, and everything was available as a check mark. So if there are 25 options, you could theoretically check all 25. Often, though, a checklist is going to be limited, where participants are asked to indicate, please choose your top 5 out of the 25 listed. Or another option might be to rank item your top 5 out of 25 listed. One of the biggest challenges that we have in constructing and administering questionnaires is terminology. We want to be able to keep a questionnaire brief, but at the same time trying to get as much data possible. And that's tough if we need to utilize space on the questionnaire to define terms for participants. Another difficulty that we have are the last two bullet points on this slide: social desirability and faking. The possibility of social desirability and faking in responses can be mitigated or at least reduced, but by taking measures to ensure confidentiality and anonymity of responses. More on those in another video this semester. You may have noticed that we'll be working on developing a questionnaire as a group this semester, so yes, there's even more to come on this topic. And here you see some of the other issues that we have with administering questionnaires. And again, we're going to discuss these in more detail when we cover survey construction in a later week. One of the other forms of measures that Macmillan addresses is observations. Observations can take form in either quantitative or qualitative research designs. Used in quantitative designs, observations are often conducted in controlled settings, are highly structured, and rely on detached observers. On the other hand, observations used in qualitative designs take place in natural settings, utilize less structured approaches, and the observer will either be detached or involved, but more often than not will be involved. Regardless of the research design, there are key considerations with observations as a form of measurement. One of the most important aspects I've seen come up with observation data in published work is the use of multiple observers and inter-rater reliability, which comes about by separate observers comparing notes, ratings, etc. The greater the agreement of observations across observers, the higher the inter-rater reliability, thus suggesting a higher level of validity, even though validity of observation cannot be measured directly. And there's actually a formula for computing inter-rater reliability that was first published by a couple of authors named Miles and Huberman in 1994. You don't need to remember that unless you're really interested in inter-rater reliability and you want to go look that up. The fourth form that Macmillan addresses in terms of measurement is the interview. You can say that there are 3 forms of questions that he views in terms of interviews. They're structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. One of the biggest issues with interviews, whether individual or focus groups, is the expense, both in terms of money and time. Depending on the project, there can be expense in conducting interviews, such as travel, compensating participants, and then on the back end, there's expense in analyzing data. Transcription is time-consuming for the researcher and expensive to have a separate party complete the transcription. For example, I actually have data right now that I collected from 5 focus groups for a study I'm working on. And if I can get funding to have it transcribed, it'll cost between $800 and $1,000 to have it done. Otherwise, I am going to be spending my summer mired in transcription, and I'm not a big fan of that. There are some areas of concern with interviews, as there are with all the forms of measurement covered in this chapter. In qualitative research, bias of the researcher is a critical issue, as the researcher is both a data collection instrument and data analysis tool. There's no way to eliminate researcher bias, but one of the things researchers who engage in qualitative work do is explicitly address potential bias as they report their findings. In fact, sometimes the researchers will address bias with the participants as they're engaged in the data collection process. Macmillan did a nice job addressing locating educational measures. I'm going to post a separate quick video about this topic, addressing some of the ideas listed on this slide in a separate video. So stay tuned for more voiceover magic.